The last crumb. The night was cold and quiet. Kayla sat under a broken metal roof, her arms wrapped around her thin body. She had not eaten for 3 days. Her stomach hurt, but the pain was normal now. What hurt more was her pride. She watched people pass by, trading anything they had for food, old clothes, family items, even their dignity. Kayla had told herself she would never do that, never beg, never kneel. But tonight she was weak. Too weak to lie to herself anymore. Her home was not a home, just a piece of land in Sector 9, the poorest area on the Threxian planet of Grelax. Her people, the Alari, were treated like insects by the Threxians. They were slaves, tools, nothing more. Kayla had once been proud, once believed in stories of honor and strength. Now, all she believed in was surviving the next day. She stood up slowly, her legs shaking, and walked toward the food zone. A market run by Threxian guards where Ilari could trade or beg for scraps. She hated going there, hated the eyes that looked at her like she was dirt. Tonight she had one thing to trade, her necklace, the last memory of her mother. It wasn't worth much, but maybe enough for one small bread. The guard looked at her and laughed, taking the necklace and throwing a half-eaten roll at her feet. Kayla picked it up, her hands shaking. She walked away, biting into it slowly, trying not to cry. Each bite tasted like ash, like defeat. She sat on a broken pipe, chewing in silence. Then the sky exploded. A loud boom shook the ground, and fire lit up the sky far in the distance. Everyone stopped, eyes wide. Something had crashed outside the city. Threxian patrols rushed toward the light, shouting in their strange language. Kayla stood frozen, the last bite of bread in her hand. Curiosity burned inside her. Was it a ship? A weapon? A way out? She had nothing left to lose. She dropped the bread and ran. Her feet hit the ground fast, dodging between buildings and shadows. Others ran too, but most were scared, afraid of what the Threxians would do if they got close. Kayla didn't care. She reached the crash site an hour later, panting, sweating, her legs numb. The fire still burned and smoke rose into the dark sky. A silver escape pod lay half buried in the ground, metal twisted and broken. She moved closer carefully, her heart racing. Inside the pod was something she had never seen before. A human. He was unconscious, blood on his forehead, his breathing shallow. Kayla stared, unable to move. She had heard stories of humans, dangerous, powerful, from a world far beyond. Some said humans once fought the Threxians and nearly won. Others said they were all dead, wiped out in the last war. But here he was, real, breathing, and helpless. Kayla's first thought was to run. This wasn't her problem. She had enough to worry about. But then she saw his face, not cruel, not cold, but tired, hurt, just like hers. She saw herself in his broken body, and something in her chest moved. She stepped into the pod and touched his arm. Warm, alive. She knew if the Threxians found him, they would kill him, or worse. She didn't know why, but she couldn't let that happen. With great effort, she pulled him from the pod and dragged him through the dirt. She didn't care that she was bleeding, that her muscles screamed. She took him back to her shelter, deep in the old sewer tunnels where no guards ever went. It took her all night, but she made it. Kayla laid him down on a soft cloth, her last blanket. She looked at him again. Who was he? Why had he come? Could he help her? Could she help him? She had no answers, only questions. But in that moment, she felt something strange, hope. For the first time in years, Kayla didn't feel completely alone, and that was more filling than any piece of bread. The broken machine. The tunnels were silent, but Kayla's mind screamed louder than ever. The human was still unconscious, his chest rising slowly like the last flicker of a dying flame. She sat near him, watching every breath, every twitch, every sound. She didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Outside, the Threxians would be searching, not for her, but for whatever had fallen from the sky. And Kayla had it right here, lying in her arms, a living human. The legends said humans were dangerous, not because of weapons, but because of ideas, because they couldn't be controlled, couldn't be broken. That's why the Threxians feared them, hunted them, erased their name from history. Kayla didn't know if this one was a warrior, a rebel, or just unlucky. But if the Threxians found him, they would burn the entire sector to ashes. She had to hide him. She had to decide. Was she saving him or hiding a bomb inside her own chest? The human stirred. Kayla jumped back, her body tense, heart racing. His eyes opened, blue, sharp, full of confusion. He looked at her, tried to speak, but only blood came out. Kayla moved closer, holding a cup of stolen water to his lips. He drank slowly, blinking, trying to focus. "Where am I?" he whispered, voice broken like glass. "Underground," Kayla answered. "Safe for now." He looked around, saw the old stone walls, the rusted pipes, the darkness. "This isn't Earth," he muttered. Kayla didn't understand the word, but she understood the sadness in his tone. "You crashed," she said. "I saw your pod. I brought you here." He coughed, sat up slowly, pain across his face. "I'm Juno," he said. "Captain Juno Cross." Kayla didn't reply. She had never heard a name like that. He reached into his suit, pulled out a small metal device, broken, sparking. "This was our signal beacon," he said. "But it's dead now." Kayla looked at the strange HFY. Glowing wires and symbols she didn't understand. "What does it do?" she asked. "It calls others," Juno said, "but now it's just dead metal." Kayla frowned. "Others like you?" "Yes," he replied. "Others who can end this." His voice shook, not with fear, but with fire. Kayla stared at him, her breath caught. "End this? And what? The slavery? The Threxians?" Juno saw her confusion and pointed to a symbol on the wall. It was the mark of the Threxian guard, drawn in blood to scare the weak. He looked at it with disgust. "I've seen that mark on 100 planets," he said. "It always ends the same." Kayla's eyes narrowed. "What ends?" Juno leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Tyrants," he said. "They fall." Kayla didn't know if it was a promise or a dream. But for the first time, someone had said what she had always wished. Out loud, a world without the Threxians. Suddenly they heard footsteps above, fast, heavy, armored boots. Kayla grabbed a rusted pipe and motioned for Juno to stay quiet. The sound grew louder, then stopped. She held her breath. 1 second, 2, 3, silence. Then a voice, robotic and cold, echoed through a hidden speaker. "This is Patrol Unit 47, scanning for unidentified crash object." Kayla's blood turned to ice. The Threxians were scanning the ground. They were looking for him. Juno stood, despite the pain, and pressed a button on his wrist. Nothing happened. The device was dead. "Your tech doesn't work here," Kayla whispered. "They jam everything." Juno looked at her, eyes steady. "Then we'll do this your way," he said. Kayla blinked. "My way?" "You survived this long," he said. "Teach me how." She hesitated, then nodded. Not because she trusted him, not yet, but because she had seen something rare in his eyes. He didn't look at her like she was weak or dirty or broken. He looked at her like she mattered, and in a world like this, that was power. Juno limped forward and Kayla helped him move. Together they disappeared deeper into the shadows. Above them, the machines of war moved like hungry wolves. But below, something had awakened, something ancient, something dangerous, something human. Bread and betrayal. The next morning came without sunlight, only the flickering buzz of dying lights in the tunnels. Kayla moved through shadows, her footsteps silent, eyes sharp. She knew every crack in the stone, every pipe that creaked, every smell of rust and mold. This place was her cage, but it was also her jungle. And today she hunted bread. Juno was growing weaker, his wounds dark and swollen. He needed food, clean water, maybe even medicine. But Kayla barely had enough for herself. She returned to the surface, wrapping her scarf tight, hiding her face. The marketplace smelled of rot and oil, filled with whispers. Slaves haggled over moldy grain, while Threxian guards watched with cold eyes. Kayla slipped through the crowd, her hands tight around a stolen data chip. Something small, something valuable. She found a trader, a nervous old Alari named Rek, Wembuas, who dealt in secrets and food. "I need supplies," she whispered. "Something fresh." Rek looked around, then leaned in close. "You're hiding something," he said, voice thin like smoke. Kayla's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "You've got fear on your breath," Rek said, "and fire in your eyes." Kayla didn't answer, just handed him the chip. He took it, sniffed it, scanned it, then nodded. "In exchange for bread, water, and one question," he said. Kayla froze. "What question?" "Did something fall from the sky last night?" Rek asked. "Something human?" Kayla's blood ran cold. She grabbed the supplies and left without a word, but her hands were shaking. Rek knew, or at least suspected, she had to move faster. Back in the tunnels, Juno sat against the wall, trying to fix the signal device with broken wire and melted glass. He looked up as Kayla entered, holding the bread and water. "You came back," he said, surprised. "I said I would," she replied, handing him the food. He ate like a soldier, fast, focused, without waste. "I think someone saw me," Kayla said quietly. "A traitor named Rek." Juno nodded. "They'll come." "Who?" she asked. "Not just guards," Juno said. "Bounty hunters, scanners, maybe even a seeker." Kayla frowned. "What's a seeker?" "Living weapon," Juno said. "Part machine, part monster, trained to find people like me." Kayla swallowed hard, fear crawling up her spine. "Then we need to leave," she said. Juno shook his head. "Not yet." He opened a small pouch from his suit and showed her a glowing cube. Inside it were tiny moving lights, like stars trapped in a box. "What is that?" she whispered. "A seed," Juno said, "for something bigger, something that can burn this empire from inside." Kayla didn't understand it, not fully, but she felt the heat of it, the danger, the hope. Before she could ask more, they heard footsteps. Not just one, but many. Quick, sharp, echoing through the tunnel walls like war drums. Kayla grabbed a broken blade. Juno stood with his hands ready. Then the shadows moved, and 5 figures stepped into the flickering light. Ilari, like her, but their faces were hard, eyes cold. One of them was Rek. "You should have shared him," Rek said, smiling without warmth. "Could have sold him to the Threxians, split the reward." Kayla stood in front of Juno. "He's not for sale." Rek laughed. "Everything is for sale here." The others raised weapons, pipes, chains, blades. Juno whispered, "I can take one, maybe 2. Kayla didn't respond. She had already moved. She struck first, fast and sharp, her blade cutting through air and flesh. Juno followed, punching low, kicking high, pain forgotten. The fight was dirty, fast, brutal. When it ended, Rek lay unconscious. 2 others limped away, bleeding. Kayla stood over them, her breath heavy, hands red. "This is your last warning," she growled. "Tell the Threxians and I'll feed you to the worms myself." The survivors fled into the dark. Kayla turned to Juno, who had a cut on his cheek but a fire in his eyes. "You didn't have to protect me," he said. "I wasn't," Kayla replied. "I was protecting the only chance I've ever had." They sat down in silence, hearts racing, the cube between them glowing softly. They had drawn blood, burned a bridge, and now there was no turning back. Someone would come soon, and they had to be ready. The war hadn't started yet, but the betrayal had. The human secret. The cube pulsed with soft light in the darkness, slow and steady like a heartbeat. Kayla couldn't stop staring at it. Juno watched her from across the tunnel, his back pressed against the stone wall. He had cleaned his wounds, made a small fire from old wire and gas leaks. But Kayla's eyes were locked on that cube. "What is it really?" she asked. "Not just a seed, not just a weapon. What does it do?" Juno didn't answer at first. He stood, walked to the cube, and picked it up gently, like it was alive. "This," he said softly, "is human memory." Kayla blinked, confused. "You mean your memories?" "Not mine," he said. "Everyone's." He held the cube out, and a hologram burst into the air. Cities made of glass, oceans in the sky, children laughing, soldiers fighting, flags rising, flags burning. Kayla gasped, stepping back. She had never seen anything like it. "This is Earth," Juno said. "Before the war, before the fall," Kayla whispered. "It's beautiful." "And dangerous," Juno added, "because truth always is." He waved his hand, and the cube dimmed again. Kayla sat beside him, her voice small. "Why show this to me?" "Because the Threxians erased your past," he said. "And mine too." Kayla clenched her fists. "They burned our books, killed our teachers, made us forget who we were. That's how they control you," Juno said. "No history, no hope. But this cube," he continued, "contains thousands of years of human rebellion, strategy, science, survival." Kayla looked at him. "Then why not use it to call your people? Bring an army?" Juno looked away, his face darkening. "Because I am the last," he said. Silence. Kayla's heart dropped. You mean all the others? Gone, Juno replied. Shot down, enslaved, erased, planet by planet. Kayla stared into the fire, the crackling sound the only thing filling the void. She had hoped for a savior, a hero, a way out. Instead, she had a broken soldier and a dying cube. But maybe that was enough. Then we fight together, she said quietly. Juno looked at her, surprised. Why would you risk everything for me? Kayla stood, her eyes burning. Because I already lost everything else. The next morning they moved deeper into the tunnels where even the Threxians refused to go. There Kayla led Juno to a forgotten chamber, an old control room from before the war, rusty panels, shattered screens, and one working console blinking slowly in the dark. This place belonged to the engineers, Kayla said. My great-grandmother used to tell stories. Juno sat at the console, connected the cube to the terminal. Lights flared and strange symbols danced across the walls. He smiled for the first time. It still works. The system scanned the cube and began to unlock data, blueprints, codes, blueprints of Threxian ships, maps of secret tunnels. Kayla stared in shock. You had all this? I couldn't access it until I found a place like this, Juno said. Now we can plan. Just then, the console flickered and an alarm buzzed quietly. Unauthorized signal detected, the screen said. Juno's face turned pale. They found the cube's pulse, he said. They're coming. Kayla grabbed his arm. Then we need to go. No, Juno said, eyes sharp. We make them come to us. Hours later, the trap was set. They planted old mines in the tunnel walls, rewired gas pipes for fire. Kayla moved like a shadow, silent and deadly. Juno positioned the cube in the open chamber, connected to fake cables. Then they waited, and they came. Threxian hunters, 6 of them, tall, armored, breathing through tubes. One of them was different, taller, colder, with a silver mask that glowed red. Kayla whispered, Is that the Seeker? Juno nodded slowly. Yes. The Seeker stepped forward, scanning the room, his voice like metal and thunder. Human detected, he said. Ilari female aiding enemy life form. Kayla raised her blade, her hand steady. The Seeker raised a glowing weapon, but before he could fire, boom, the mines exploded, gas ignited, fire roared through the tunnel like a dragon. 2 hunters fell, burning, screaming. Juno fired his stolen Threxian pistol, hitting another. Kayla leapt from the shadows, slicing fast and low. The room shook with chaos, sparks and smoke filling the air. But the Seeker did not fall. He turned slowly, his mask cracked, revealing part of a face. Not machine, not beast, but once human. Kayla froze. What are you? The Seeker spoke one word, cold and final. Punishment. Then the fire consumed the room. Kayla and Juno escaped into the darkness, coughing, bleeding, but alive. Behind them, the cube glowed bright inside Juno's pack. It had woken something, ancient, dangerous, and now it couldn't be stopped. The human wasn't just a survivor, he was a spark. And sparks make fire. Sparks of war. The fire had changed everything. The tunnels still burned behind them, glowing red like the inside of a dying beast. Kayla limped through the ash, her arm bleeding, her lungs filled with smoke. Juno moved beside her, one hand on his chest, where a cracked rib screamed with every breath. They were broken, yes, but not defeated, because now the Empire knew their names, and that meant the war had truly begun. They hid for 3 days in the deep sewer vaults beneath Sector 12. Old tech surrounded them, forgotten screens, rusted consoles, shattered drones. Kayla wired a signal trap to confuse Threxian scanners while Juno recovered slowly. The cube stayed quiet in his bag, but both of them could feel its energy growing. Something was building. On the 4th day, a whisper reached them. An old woman arrived with bandages and dry bread, her eyes cloudy, but her voice strong. You're the girl who burned the hunter, she said, and the human who makes machines talk again. Kayla stared at her, cautious. Who are you? The woman smiled. The beginning of your army. Behind her, 6 more figures stepped from the shadows. Ilari of all ages, holding knives, pipes, tools. Not soldiers, not yet, but ready. That night, Kayla sat beside Juno in silence, watching the group train. They fought clumsy, moved slow, but every swing carried something stronger than skill, rage. These people aren't warriors, she said. They'll die. Juno nodded. Then we teach them how not to. But we need more than knives, Kayla whispered. We need machines, weapons, plans. Juno opened his pack and pulled out a second device, small and flat, shaped like a coin. This is an infiltrator, he said. I built it before the crash. Kayla leaned closer, watching the blue light pulse inside it. It sneaks into Threxian systems, Juno explained. Steals maps, locations, routes. Can it reach the power grid? Kayla asked, her eyes narrowing. Juno looked at her surprised. Yes, he said slowly. But why? Kayla stood up, her voice low and steady. Because I want to turn their lights off. The next mission began at night. Under the acid rain, Kayla, Juno, and 2 others crept through a maintenance shaft beneath the city's central energy core. Threxian drones buzzed above, but the sewers below were forgotten, full of rust and silence. Juno hacked the access gate, and Kayla slipped inside, silent as a shadow. The power grid stretched like a glowing forest. Tall towers, humming wires, blinking lights. She placed the infiltrator on the central node, then waited, heart pounding. Back in the tunnels, Juno watched the device from a cracked tablet. Almost there, he whispered. Come on, come on. The screen blinked. Access granted. Suddenly, Sector 9 went dark. Streetlights vanished, alarms stopped, towers powered down one by one. For the first time in decades, the slaves saw darkness, real, beautiful, free darkness, and in that darkness they moved. Alari rebels smashed Threxian storage units, rescued prisoners, and burned patrol mechs in their cages. The night was chaos, and Kayla loved every second of it. But power always comes with a price. In the ruins of the Sector 9 barracks, Kayla found a young Alari girl hiding under a collapsed wall. She pulled her out, holding her close. Where's your family? Kayla asked gently. The girl didn't speak, just pointed to the smoke. Kayla's heart cracked. They had started a fire, yes, but fire doesn't choose its victims. Back in the vault, the rebels cheered. Kayla didn't. Juno saw her standing alone, staring at her blade. You did what you had to do, he said. I know, she whispered. But how many will I have to burn before we're free? Juno didn't answer because he didn't know. Freedom was never clean. The next morning, a message played across every screen in the city. The Threxian governor stood tall, his armor glowing gold, his voice cold and clear. This act of rebellion will not be tolerated, he said. The Alari who assist the human will be executed. Then a hologram appeared, Kayla's face, and under it, one word, terrorist. Kayla turned to Juno, her voice steady. So they've made it official. They fear you, Juno said. Good. No, Kayla replied, her eyes cold as stone. Not yet. She looked down at the cube, which now glowed brighter than ever. Let's show them what fear really looks like. Because this was no longer survival, this was war, and Kayla had no intention of losing. Dignity restored. The rebels moved like whispers through the city. Every night, another Threxian patrol went missing. Every morning, another prisoner escaped. Another storage unit burned. And with every act of defiance, Kayla's name spread. Not as a beggar, not as a slave, but as something new, something dangerous, a symbol. Kayla stood in front of a cracked mirror, wrapping a strip of metal around her wrist like a bracelet. It wasn't for beauty, it was for memory. Because tonight, she was going back to the place where she lost everything. Back to the man who had forced her to trade her mother's necklace for bread. The man who had laughed when she fell to her knees, hungry, broken, alone. His name was Commander Tovek, a low-ranking Threxian who ruled the food zone like a god. But gods fall, and Kayla was coming to push him off his throne. Juno stood at the edge of the tunnel, watching her prepare. You don't have to do this, he said. I do, Kayla replied, tying her scarf tight. Not for revenge. Then for what, he asked. She looked at him, her eyes steady. For the girl who cried that night and had no one to stand for her. The food zone Didn't changed, same broken stalls, same smell of oil and old blood, but this time Kayla didn't walk in with her head down. She walked tall, wearing black armor pieced together from fallen guards. People turned and stared, some whispered her name, some backed away in fear. She didn't care. She walked straight to the center of the square where Tovek sat in a raised chair surrounded by guards. He was older now, heavier, but his smirk hadn't changed. "Well, look what the sewer dragged in," he said, laughing. The little beggar with fire in her eyes. Kayla didn't speak. She just stepped forward, calm, controlled. Tovek's guards raised their weapons, but before they could move, Juno's signal jammer activated. All the weapons died in their hands, powered down like toys. Tovek stood confused. "What is this?" Kayla walked up the steps slowly, her boots echoing. "You don't remember me," she said. "But I remember every word you said the night you broke me." Tovek laughed, trying to stay in control. "You think you scare me? You're just a rebel rat with a loud voice." Kayla reached into her pack and pulled out the cube. It floated between them, glowing brighter than ever. Holograms burst into the air, images of beaten slaves, burning villages, secret documents stolen from the Threxian vaults. Tovek stepped back. "What is this? How did you get this?" Kayla's voice was like steel. "The truth," she said. "Everything your empire tried to hide." Guards began to whisper. People in the market watched, eyes wide. Kayla turned to the crowd. "I was once like you," she said, "hungry, afraid, silent. I gave up everything to survive," she continued, "but survival is not life. Today," she said, raising her voice, "we stop surviving, we start living." Tovek pulled a blade from his belt and rushed her, but Kayla moved like wind. She dodged, grabbed his wrist, twisted it, and brought him to his knees in front of the very people he once ruled. "You fed on our fear," she whispered in his ear. "Now choke on it." She didn't kill him. She looked at the crowd, then turned her back, because real power doesn't need blood, it needs belief. And the people believed. Later that night, Kayla and Juno returned to the hideout. The cube now projected maps of Threxian strongholds. Rebel cells from other sectors began to send messages, joining the cause. Kayla stood in the center, her voice calm, her hands steady. "We fight smarter now," she said. "No more random hits, no more running." Juno nodded beside her. "What's the plan?" he asked. Kayla looked at the largest mark on the map, a fortress in the north, the heart of the Threxian control grid. "We cut off the heads," she said. "And what if we fail?" Juno asked. Kayla smiled for the first time in days. "Then we do it louder next time." Because she was no longer the girl who traded dignity for bread, she was the voice of a rising storm, and that storm was ready to break the sky, a new sky. The wind howled across the frozen plains of the north, snow fell like ash, quiet but heavy. Above the mountains, the Threxian fortress stood tall, black metal and blue lights pulsing like a giant heart. This was it, the final stronghold, the command center where the Threxians watched, controlled, and crushed every spark of resistance. Kayla stood at the ridge with Juno and 50 rebels behind her. They had no tanks, no warships, no grand army, but they had a plan, and they had nothing left to lose. Juno crouched beside her, holding a tablet connected to the cube. "The control grid runs through the main tower," he said. "If we overload it, the whole network goes down." "And what happens then?" Kayla asked, eyes never leaving the fortress. "Every collar, every scanner, every patrol mech, gone," he said. "The Threxians lose everything in one breath." Kayla nodded slowly. "And what do we lose?" Juno looked at her, his voice quiet. "Maybe us." She smiled, not from joy, but from knowing how far they had come, and how close they were to breaking the sky open. The plan was simple and suicidal. They would send 3 teams, one to plant explosives at the support columns, one to cut the power grid from below, and Kayla and Juno would go inside, straight to the command core, to upload the final code from the cube. The first blast shook the earth. Rebels swarmed through the side entrance, drawing fire from turret drones. Kayla moved fast, slicing through a steel door with a plasma cutter. Inside, alarms blared, red lights flashing like blood in rhythm. Juno hacked security doors, while Kayla cleared the halls with her blade. They didn't stop, not for pain, not for fear, not even when the bodies fell, because behind every second was a lifetime waiting to be lived. They reached the core room. A massive chamber filled with screens, Threxian generals shouting, guards panicking, and in the center stood someone Kayla didn't expect, the Seeker. His mask was gone, revealing a pale, human-like face with glowing Threxian eyes. Juno froze. "No," he whispered. "That's not a machine." Kayla's heart pounded. "Who is he?" Juno stepped forward, his voice breaking. "He was my commander," he said. "Captain Reese, captured, twisted, turned into this." The Seeker stepped toward them, voice deeper than before. "You think you're saving them," he said, "but you're just repeating history." Kayla raised her blade. "We're not here to repeat it. We're here to break it." The fight was brutal. Reese moved like lightning, half human, half machine, powered by rage and regret. Kayla and Juno fought together, backs to each other, every move in sync. In the end, Kayla brought the Seeker to his knees. Juno hesitated, his hands shaking, memories flooding him. Kayla took the blade from his hand and ended it, not with anger, but with peace. They reached the console and inserted the cube. The lights flickered, the floor trembled. Outside, towers exploded, slave collars shorted, patrol mechs shut down and crashed to the ground. Across the planet, silence spread, then voices rising, screaming, laughing, freedom, real freedom. Kayla stood in the command chamber, her body bruised, her hands shaking, but her eyes burned bright. Juno turned to her. "It's done," he said. "The signal is clean." "I can send a call," he continued. "Maybe someone out there still hears us." Kayla nodded slowly. "Then send it." Juno pressed the button, and for the first time in years, the stars heard a human voice again. Later, as the fortress burned behind them, Juno asked the question he had held for days. "There's room in the shuttle," he said. "If the signal reaches a fleet, I'll go." Kayla looked at him, silent. "I want you to come with me," he added. "You deserve a better life." Kayla looked out at the horizon where thousands of Alari were gathering, no longer slaves, no longer silent. "I do," she said, "but so do they. You gave me a reason to stand," she continued. "Now it's my turn to give them one." Juno smiled, not out of sadness, but pride. "You were never meant to follow," he said. "You were meant to lead." The next morning, under a sky no longer ruled by ships or guns, Kayla stood atop the broken fortress. She raised the same metal wristband she had once worn as a symbol of pain. Now it was a crown, and below her, thousands raised their hands in return, not with fear, but with fire. Because the world had changed, because dignity had returned, because the sky was theirs now, and Kayla was no longer just a name, she was the beginning of everything. The end.